Let's begin by davening that the fruit of our learning should help to bring home the hostages alive and those who are no longer alive, and protect our soldiers and Am Yisrael and all the innocents, and bring an end to this war.
Man,
It's very difficult, I assume, for all of us. We have no words to say, but the first thing so last week we more or less finished this issue for the time being about Tosefet Shabbat and when Shabbat begins and so forth. But now I was listening from a couple of weeks ago, and Paul had asked me, why do we light candles 40 minutes early
in Jerusalem.
Yerushalayim? So, and I said what I understood is that was the minhag of the Gra that was brought to Yerushalayim by his students, and so. Oh wait, not sharing the right screen. Just a second. Yeah, so there's a sefer called the Maser Rav, which is a compilation of minhagim and sometimes little stories about Ra. I don't remember who wrote it. One of his Talmidim wrote it. Maybe more than one of his Talmidim. And what it says here, the Maser Rav, is Hadlakata ner makdim ma'od lahadlik. Right. So he would light candles very early. So it doesn't give a specific time, but it says very early. And Hamachat Ichruhu, one time they made him late, V'lo haya maniach lahadlik, afilu al yedei eno Yehudi. In other words, he got home late somehow, or he was at home and he couldn't light, and then when it was after the time that he would normally light, and he wouldn't let candles be lit, even not by a Jew, even by a non-Jew. Lo amru adayin mizmor shir liyom Shabbat. Even though they hadn't yet said mizmor shir liyom Shabbat in shul, which is the time that would mark formally the time that they were accepting Shabbat in the shul for the rest of the Kehillah. So this is the Makor in the Maser Rav. It doesn't say how long, but you see a couple of things. One is that he would light very early, and the other is that he considered that time to be, from the time he lit, he considered that to be Kabbalat Shabbat for him, that he was accepting upon himself Shabbat, and that this, in the context of what we've learned so far, it would seem that that would be Tosefet Shabbat, right? He's adding on to Meichol Kodesh, but he considered it to be already Shabbat l'chol davar, even though last week when we were looking in the Shulchan Aruch, we saw that there's that even the time of Ben Hashmashot, that there were certain things that you would still be allowed to say to a non-Jew to do. He was machmir on himself, so that's not the same as a psak from the Gra. That was his minhag, which presumably was the way he held halacha. But now here it says in the parentheses, Ayin b'shulchan aruch shel Sifrat Reish Samech Aleph, Sif Katag Yud Aleph. Look in his Shulchan Aruch. Look at his. He has comments on the Shulchan Aruch. So I did look through that. He has a very long discussion about all of the sources that we discussed, And like we saw in the Aruch HaShulchan, the Gra rejects Rabbeinu Tam. He rejects his contentions, and he develops a shita there. But even there, and I'm not going to go through it, um, but even there, he doesn't say that you light 40 minutes before. So presumably this was some kind of a minhag that came from the Grab. However, this is what I was looking for now, and I can't find it this second, which is one of the problems when I restart my computer and I don't have time to look through the history. There is a website that I found, one of these websites where people ask halachic questions and semi-halachic questions about where the minhag for lighting 40 minutes in Jerusalem comes from. And what was interesting in the website, they say that it's a very old minhag in Yerushalayim that goes back hundreds of years, meaning well before the Gra, and not just Ashkenazim, also Sephardim, right? Because Sephardim were the dominant group in Yerushalayim for most of that time, and they don't have a specific source, but there are apparently sources, not just oral sources, that refer to this idea that it was always minhag in Yerushalayim, always, at least for the last several hundred years, to light candles early. So, and I think it was there. Now I apologize because I can't find it, but if I find it, I'll send you the link later. I think that there were different theories about why. And one of them was that it had to do with the fact that different parts of Yerushalayim were at different elevations, and so people would see sundown at different times, and they wanted, I guess the implication being they wanted everybody to light in a uniform way, even people who would have trouble otherwise seeing the sun, or they saw sundown or the stars and so forth at different times. I don't know, but it is an interesting question, and that's what I found. So I was right that this was minhag hagra, I believe, in some way, even though he doesn't say specifically 40 minutes, but he says harbe, right? He started lighting much earlier than Shabbos, and but it's more than that. It's more than that. Apparently, the minhag preceded the gra in Yerushalayim. So, yeah, it was just an interesting tidbit I thought I would throw in.
If it goes hundreds of years back, people didn't have watches.
Right. So
And
that's
so they were dependent on the sun or some on watching the sun, something like this.
exactly. So the idea of 40 minutes per se, although theoretically that could have come from Talmidei Hagra, but even then, I mean, there were clocks, but you would have had to have been very wealthy to own a watch. So I don't know that it
There
was
was a big clock at Shar Yafo,
right.
which the British, I don't know, they pulled it down. I have no idea why, but
Maybe
it
they
was
like.
there for a long time. Yeah. What?
Yeah, I heard. Yeah, maybe they wanted to take it back to England with them. I don't know.
No,
They,
it was not. It was the Turks that built it. It was the Ottomans.
no, I understand, but British are famous for stealing things from around the world and then putting them in the British Museum.
Ah, it's not an obelisk.
So that's a separate discussion. Okay, so we're good. So okay, I'll try to remember to find that website. And in the meantime, we are going to continue. And now that I had to restart my computer, it's gonna, as we're gonna need some other sources, and I'll just have to open them as we go. Just a second. In other words, usually I try to set them up in advance, but it's better if we just get started. So here, now after quite a long time, we're going to move on in the Gemara. Oh, oh my gosh, and now I just remembered something. All right, doesn't matter. Okay. All right, so in the Gemara, we're up to here. This is on Pei Aleph Amud Bet. So the Mishnah said, "Achal ochlin she'en ru'uyin la'achila." Right. So the Mishnah says, if one eats food that's not fit for eating on Yom Kippur, then you're patur. You're patur from karet for the isur of being over on the inui nefesh on Yom Kippur. So Amar Rava, Rava says, Kas pilpile biyoma de kippure patur. If somebody chews pepper on Yom Kippur, they are exempt, right? They're patur. Kas zangvila biyom de kippure patur. If you chew ginger on Yom Kippur, you're patur. Okay, so what's so tell me what Rav is saying. What is he trying to impart here in this context?
I think he's trying to say what's trying to define what is suitable for what's food, what's suitable for eating.
Okay. Yeah, so he brings two examples of foods, things that we might think are food, because we do eat pilpil and we do eat zangvil. But he says if you chew them on Yom Kippur, you're exempt. So what would be
It's a tavlin. It's not really food.
So and so therefore, and so let's say that's true. So therefore what? So why is that relevant in this context? If it's a spice, if these are spices,
Spice, tavlin.
so then what are you saying? That if you chew on spices on Yom Kippur, if you wanted to try to make this into a larger rule, you could say if you chew on spices on Yom Kippur, then you're patur. Let's say maybe that's what he's saying. Meitive, but the Gemara asks a kasha on him. Says, Haya Rebbe Meir Omer, Mimashma shene'amar v'arlatem orlato et piryo. Eini yodea she'etz ma'achalhu. Once the Torah tells us that arlatem orlato et piryo, we'll look at this pasuk in a moment. Don't I know that it's talking about a tree that bears edible fruit? Elamat Talmud Lomar Eitz Ma'achal. So then, why does the Torah say Eitz Ma'achal? Eitz Shatam Eitzo Upiryo Shaven. So it's talking about a tree whose the taste of its wood and its fruit are the same. Haviomer Zepilpili. So we would say then that's peppers. The medcha shapilpelin chayavin be'orla. it teaches you that kilpel is chayav be'orla, right? It's under the obligations of orla. Ve'ein Eretz Yisrael chasera klum, and Eretz Yisrael is not missing anything. Shnema lo techsar kol ba. Okay, so first let's take a look at this pasuk so we can understand the bright a little better. Bear with me. Okay, so this is we're in Vayikra, Perek Tet, and this is where we get the mitzvah of Orla. It says, "V'chitavo el haaretz," when you come to the land, "Unatatem kol eitz ma'achal," and you plant any tree uh, of eating, right? Any tree that bears edible fruit, presumably. Va'araltem orlato et piryo. Okay, so this is a difficult pasuk to translate. They say in their translation, then you shall count their fruit as forbidden, which kind of skirts the issue of what orlatem orlato means. But it means that, okay, so what's an orla? What does the word mean, orla? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Michael.
Is it in conjunction with Milah, bris Milah?
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at. In other words, the orla is the foreskin, and we have it both as in Tanakh we have it as both the physical foreskin of the male genitalia, but also, or at least of the penis, and we also have it as a
The
like
heart. We talk about the heart too, being
right, right. It's also used metaphorically, right? That in Yirmiyahu and other places that your heart can have a foreskin, so it's something that's covering up something and preventing it, uh, from being exposed somehow, right? Let's say that. So the question is, what does it mean here, va'araltem orlato? In the Unclus, he translates it like this: V'arete alun ara, when you go up to the land, titzvun kol ilan demechal, and that you plant or cause to stand up any tree that for eating. Uturachakun rachaka yat ibe. You should keep away or make far away from you uh, its fruit, not shanim. So our Altema Alatoet Piryo, the way he's reading it, we could also read it like this. The pasuk, but pasuk here has an etachta. Anyway, our Altem Arlato Shalosh Shanim, that you have to, as it were, cover up. So the more literal translation might be to cover it up, to cover up the fruit. And he says it more conceptually that you have to keep away from the fruit for 3 years. Shalosh shanim yadachem arelim lo yachel. You have to be away from it. Yehei lachon merachak. It should be distant from you for 3 years. You have to keep away from it to destroy it. Yatzin la'abda. It should, and it cannot be eaten. Yeah. They have a targum of the targum on the website. They have the translation into English, which is usually pretty good, although sometimes I find it lacking. Anyway, all right. So now the pasuk. Kitavo it's in the tatem kol eitz ma'achal. So what are we talking about? We're talking about a tree that produces food. And then the pasuk says, "Va'araltem arlato et piryo." So the all right. So we'll take the Targum's translation. You have to keep away from its fruit. You have to keep away from its fruit. So uh, the Braita that's being brought now. Let's try to understand a little bit more. So Rabbi Meir would say, "Mimashma shene'amar va'araltem arlato et piryo, eini yodea she'etz ma'achalhu." Once the Torah says, "Va'araltem arlato et piryo," don't I know that it's talking about a tree that produces food? So what's his point? What's he trying to say?
The pasuk says Eitz ma'achel, and the ma'achel is superfluous because it later on says perav, so that implies that it's a fruit tree or a tree you can eat from.
Excellent. So he's saying the words eitz ma'achal here are superfluous. I don't need them. So ela ma talmud lomar eitz ma'achal. So why did the Torah say eitz ma'achal? So he says eitz shetam eitzo ufiryo shaveh. It refers to a tree whose the taste of its wood and its fruit are the same. So how does he get that from the pasuk? It's talking about a tree whose wood and fruit taste the same. In a way, I misled you because I translated the words eitz ma'achal. But what could eitz ma'achal mean?
Fruit tree.
It can read a fruit tree, but let's take it. That's basically how I translate it. I said it produces food, but if you were take a more simple or simplistic translation of eitz ma'achal,
It could be a tree that you actually eat part of the tree.
it's a tree that you eat. Eitz ma'achal. The eitz itself is a ma'achal, right? So it's a more literal translation of the pasuk. And why does Rabbi Meir offer that as a as the way he wants to understand? Because he says, I don't need the words eitz ma'achal, right? Because I already know that it gives fruit from the part of the pasuk that says aral temet arleto et piryo. I know that it gives fruit. So eitz ma'achal doesn't tell me anything I didn't know. So it must be telling me something else. So rather, it's there to tell me eitz ma'achal. It's referring to a tree that you eat, or that could be eaten, or that at least tastes the same as the fruit. And what would that be? So he says, "Haviomer zepil pili." So he says that would be peppers. Now, I agonized over this for a while this past week, actually the last 2 weeks, about what kind of peppers they're talking about. Right? Pepper, both in Hebrew and in English and in other languages, refers to really a variety of different plants that are really unrelated. Um, However, and I'm still not sure. In fact, where I'm staying, my brother has one of these very nice volumes of the Steinsaltz, the Koren edition, very fancy, and he, in English, and it has all the notes and the pictures and all of that. He doesn't have any comment. Steinsaltz also doesn't have any comment on Pilpilin. So I tend to think that it's talking about what we would, the pepper tree that we get black pepper from. I do tend to think that because it's said in conjunction with ginger. And like Paul said earlier, it's a spice. In other words, I think that it's put in conjunction with ginger because those are both things that were raised primarily not to be eaten fresh. They were primarily cultivated in order to be dried out and used as spice. So that's my guess. That's my uneducated guess that that's what it's talking about. It does make a difference both for Yom Kippur and in a moment I'll show you because this Breita of Rabbi Meir appears in a different context. It appears in Masechet Brachot. There's discussion in Masechet Brachot in the context of Brachot, and I will, in a moment, I'll show you just part of the sugya there. But keeping it on track here, so let's just get through this part of the Breita. So Rabbi Meir, so the Haya Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Meir said, Ishmanat mi mashmash nemar va'araltem aralato et piryo. Eini yodea she'etz ma'achalhu. Right? So I know already from the fact that it's talking about orla and which implies that it's talking about, excuse me, a tree that, and then et piryo, that produces fruit. So I already know that I'm talking about a tree that produces fruit. So why does the Torah say eitz ma'achal? It's to tell me that that it's going to include a tree that the fruit tastes like the branch, that tastes like the wood. And what would that be? That would be pepper. And when I say black pepper, because I started to go into this, you can get black pepper, white pepper, and green pepper all from the same pepper plant. It's really based on the cultivation. But the fruit is a little round fruit that is cultivated specifically to be dried out and then to be used as a spice. In any event, Eitz Shetam Eitzo Piryo Shabeh, Lamedcha Havyomer Ze Pilpilin. Lamedcha Shepilpilin Chayavin Be'orla. So this teaches you that peppers are Chayav Be'orla. So, and Ein Eretz Yisrael Chasera Klum Shnemar Lo Tachsar Kolba. And Israel is not missing anything. This last part of Eretz Yisrael Lo Chasera Klum, I want to leave this aside. I'll try to talk about it a little bit later, but because it's not, it doesn't, I don't need it immediately for the halachic aspect of the Breita. Okay, so what's the halacha that I get out of Rabbi Meir's Breita? What halacha do I get from this Breita?
That pilpil tree is subject to orla.
Right. That's his chidush. In other words, apparently there's some question about the pilpil tree because actually it grows close to the ground. It's more of a bush, and it's not obvious that this is going to be considered a tree for the purposes of orla. So based on his drasha, he says no, it's going to be a tree for the purposes of orla. Fine. So this Breita was brought as a kasha on Rava. Rava said if you chew pepper on Yom Kippur, that you're patur. So what's the kasha to Rava from here?
In the Rabbi Meir's statement, he's talking about perov, about fruit. And so therefore, and he's saying specifically that's pepper, and therefore pepper should be something, is something substantial, something you eat, and therefore you should not be patur if you eat it on Yom Kippur.
Oh, very good. In other words, there seems to be a direct contradiction to Rava. Rava's so like you said earlier, what's the purpose of Rava's statement in this context? Because the Mishnah says if you eat food that's not fit to eat, then you're patur. Rava brings the example of pilpilin, right? If you chew on peppers on Yom Kippur, you're patur, presumably because it's not food that's fit to eat. But according to Rebbe Meir, it is food that's fit to eat because we see it's chayav ba'orla. So it's a kasha on Rava. So the Gemara says lo kasha, right? There isn't a contradiction. Ha berativta, ha biyabeshta. This one's talking about moist, and this one's talking about dried. So what does he mean? What does the Gemara mean? What's dry and what's moist?
They're talking about the fruit, the peppercorn. So when it's dry, then you would be patur because it's not really food. But when it's undried, when it's fresh, now it's still considered fruit, and then you would be chayav.
Very good. So it differentiates between the dried state, which is the state, it's not that it's inedible, but it's not considered to be ma'achal that's ra'ui le'echol. People don't eat dried peppercorns as a matter of course. And so if you chew on it on Yom Kippur, Rava says you'll be patur. But Rava would also agree that if you were to chew on the moist fruit of the pepper, that you would be chayav, even though maybe people don't do it the same way. So, okay, we'll get to that in a second. So,
Tell,
go ahead.
how can you eat a shiur of pepper, half mouthful of pepper, or of any spice?
Well, that's the
it would
point.
be an
That's the point. In other words, you're not
how
allowed.
do you
Okay.
say in English? Explore, a deed or something.
How would you say it in Hebrew? What you're trying to say?
I don't remember.
You pay.
מבצע או משהו כזה.
like מבצע צבאי, like
No.
no. All right, lo mishane. But the point.
I check it. Yeah. Okay.
The point is that how would you do it? It's possible to do it. You could do it, but that's the point. The point is that first of all, let's just review some things that we learned a long time ago. That even if you eat less than a shiur on Yom Kippur, it's still asur. It's patur, but it is asur. According to Rabbi Yochanan, it's asur midioraita. But even if you say he ate a whole shiur, he would still be patur because that's the point. Any machal, that's any ochlin that sheinan ru'uyin, right? Any kind of food that's not fit for eating, you're going to be patur if you eat even a shiur. So take your pick. There are lots of things that are inedible in the world, including just chewing on grass or chewing on wood or things like that. But here
it would be an achievement.
It would be an achievement. I mean, so, and what does Rashi say? Kas pilpilin. He says, "Ein ze yishuv hadad." You don't get that. This is the point. It always comes back. You don't get yishuv hadad from chewing on peppers. Shein ze derech achilato. That's not the way you eat them. And then we have the Braita of Rebbe Meir, Meitive, and what we learn from the Braita, Alma ma'achal karile. I learned from the Braita that pilpilin are called food. Shapilpilin chayavin ba'orla min ilanhu, right? It's a type of tree. And like I say, there's a wider context to that, and it has to do with the particulars of the pilpil tree and how it grows. And then the Gemara answers Rava for Rava. So how does Rava understand how can he maintain his stance in opposition to the Braita? So he would say that the pilpilin for which you'll be patur, though those will be dry ones, but the ones that are considered to be fruit, those were the retivta. Rashi says retiva chazi l'machal, that the moist ones are fit for eating. I think it's possible that Rashi adds in chazi l'machal because that seems to be obvious from the Gemara, but I think it just has to do with the idea that probably it was not common for people to eat even moist pepper. Because if I'm correct, and the pepper that it's talking about is the kind of pepper that you make ground pepper from, like black pepper, I don't know how common it would have been to eat the raw fruit without it being dried and so forth. So
what we call people yarok or tzahor or something like this.
yeah, it would that would be right. Well, it's still green and it's still, I don't know. I started to look through the Wikipedia article and some other articles about different things. Yeah, it goes through different stages of growth, and it produces a little round fruit, and then people try it out. Anyway, more than that I can't say. But in terms of our immediate context, so I understand that. So what would come out of Rava's statement if you chew on dried pepper? And presumably it's also going to be true for the ginger. If you chew on dried ginger on Yom Kippur, you're patur. So let's go on. Amar le Ravina lemeremar, v'ha'amar Rav Nachman. So Ravina, so this is a later discussion after this first discussion, right? This is maybe a couple of generations later. Ravina says to Meremar, v'ha'amar Rav Nachman, hai himlata da'ati mibei hinduai sharia. This himlata that comes from the place of Hindus, presumably India, is permitted. Umavarchinan alei borei pri ha'adama, and the bracha for it is borei pri ha'adama. So, first of all, we have to understand what's himlata. Rashi says lituriga in Old French. I don't know if that rings a bell to our French speaker. I don't have all of my Rashi books here, but I whatever. It seems to be that everybody agrees what they say here. This is the translation of the Old French. Mashkeh samich mitubal bitvash. It's a thick liquid that is spiced and that's in honey. But more specifically, Rashi says, "Shemafat min besamim ktushim bidvash," that we let's say spice up with crushed pieces of spice in honey. And the spice that apparently is being referred to here is ginger. So this is like, nowadays you can also go and get like ginger candy. That's basically what it's talking about. It was not necessarily a candy that you chew, but whatever. It was something that maybe I don't know. I'm not sure exactly what the himlita was, but it was something like that. It's like ginger that was sweetened with honey that people would eat. In other words, and so what is it? It's ginger that you eat, that you in furash eat. It's not something that you're doing that most people don't do. People actually go out of their way to eat this ginger. So Ravina says to Ramemar, Rav Nachman said, this himlita that comes from India is permitted, and we make the blessing of Borei Peri Ha'adama on it. So, what was Rav Nachman saying? What does he mean that it's permitted? And he tells us the bracha. So, so Rav Nachman's statement. I'll just jump the gun here a little bit. Rav Nachman's statement where he says this himlata that comes from Be Hinduai Sharia that it's mutar, it's obviously, I would say, not in the context of Yom Kippur, because nobody would say that you could have ginger candy on Yom Kippur. So it's mutar in some other context. If you see what I'm saying, right? And also because I see, he says, the bracha that you say on it is Borei Peri Ha'adama. So I understand that this more has to do with the context of brachot. So let's open up and try to get a little bit better view of this. Hold on. So our Gemara, this part of the Gemara, as I mentioned earlier, appears in Masechet Brachot. Oh, that's not the right. That's not right. Just a second. Um, okay. Make sure we're looking at this. Okay, yeah, you see the screen. Okay. So here, this is part of a much longer discussion about different things that grow from the ground, and now we're going to understand that there's going to be a relationship between a plant, any kind of edible fruit or any kind of edible plant, and what its bracha is going to be, and its relationship to orla. Is it chayab? In other words, do we consider it to be a tree for orla? If I consider it to be a tree for orla, then presumably I would also consider it to be a tree for its bracha, right? And then now we also know from our Gemara that it's going to be, it's also going to be important for us to know if something is considered to be food at all. Is it a ma'achal at all? Because if it's not food, even if you eat it, then there is no bracha, right? So if you start chewing on what do kids like to eat, crayons and paste and things like that, you don't say a bracha beforehand. But it's also true of things that grow from the ground, right? Because so here we have this case, Pilpile, Rav Sheshet Amar, Shehakol. So for peppers, Rav Sheshet says you say the bracha of shehakol. Rav Amar lo klum. Rava says you don't say anything. Va'az the Rav l'ta'amei. Rava goes according to his shita. Da'amar Rava kas pilpile biyom dechipure patur. Kas zangvila biyom dechipure patur. Okay, so Rav Sheshet says that if you're eating peppers, you say shehakol. And Rava says you don't say a bracha at all. So if you don't say a bracha at all, what does that imply about their status? Like, why wouldn't you say a bracha on them?
It's not food.
Because it's not food. And so the Gemara says this goes like the same way Rava holds regarding peppers on Yom Kippur. If you chew on peppers on Yom Kippur, you're patur. For the same reason that you're not chayav a bracha, then you're patur for eating them or at least chewing on them on Yom Kippur. So now,
What does this mean for toothpaste? Toothpaste is not food, but you might be able to use it.
Okay, so actually
on Yom Kippur to brush your teeth with toothpaste.
So we hold no.
Yeah, I know, but according to what's
well, actually,
the Tana here might make.
No, but I'll tell you, I get it from the Gemara. I get it from our Gemara. How do I see it from the Gemara itself?
It's wet, but it's still not food.
It's a law. No, but in other words, so first of all, the conclusion is that as and the Gemara is going to go through the same thing here as it did in the Gemara in Yoma, and it's going to bring the Braita from Rebbe Meir. The conclusion is going to be that Rava was talking about what kinds of peppers?
Dried peppers.
Dry peppers. So he's talking really only about dry peppers, and the moist peppers he would be mechayev. So that doesn't answer the question. But what is Rava's din? His din is kas pilpile biyom dechipure patur. So what does patur mean?
Patur from karet, from bringing a korban. But,
all right, but go ahead.
It's still asur.
It's still asur. Nobody says that you're allowed. Rava doesn't say l'chatchila you're allowed to chew on peppers on Yom Kippur. It just says if you chew on peppers on Yom Kippur, you're patur, and you would be so patur that even if you actually ate a shiur of them, you would still be patur. But nobody says you're allowed to do it. So the implication is it's not something that you're allowed to do. But the nafkamina is going to be is if you actually ate a shiur, you'll still be patur from karet and any other associated possible punishment. So that's the quick answer to your question. In other words, there's no heter in the Gemara for that. Gemara is not matir. It just says that if you do it, you're patur. That's the basis for the way we paskin, that you're not allowed to chew on things like that. Although I think I mentioned, because this came up a long time ago, we are matir to chew on stuff like that on Tisha B'Av. Right? Tisha B'Av is to Rabbanan, it's not as chamur. There's no Iser Karet, so there is a heter. So sometimes on Tisha B'Av, before Tisha B'Av, I would personally chew on a piece of gum and like get rid of actually most of its taste, but like just make it chewable. And then during the day, if I felt like I had the urge, I would chew on the gum. Basically, for the same reason I could be chewing on I don't know how much I'd want to chew on peppers, but maybe on ginger. By the way, and in contrast to that, you are lechatchila. It's interesting. You're allowed to smell things that smell good on Yom Kippur. And so, anybody who's been in shul, certainly in Yerushalayim, somebody always ends up passing around their snuff box, which actually is very nice. It's a nice little
But
pick me
it's
up.
okay. It's okay. I understand. Yes.
Yeah,
Maybe this-
that you're allowed to do. That's actually mutar. And so you see, I don't want to say it's exactly a minhag, but I mean the people that over the many years that I've seen it, they have these very fancy silver boxes with the snuff, right? So it's something that they, uh, something that him mechabdim, right? They give it due respect.
It's
And then,
Judaic.
yeah, yeah. So,
It's like a
okay,
kiddush. Oh,
yeah, yeah,
for
kilo,
the
yeah. Maybe lo ad kedei
lulav,
kach,
for the
but
lulav, they have this
yes, they have
special.
the silver holders.
Yes.
Yeah.
Not lulav, not lulav.
The etrog,
For the etrog,
yeah.
yes. Mhm.
Meitive. So here now we have Rava brought in a different context. The context now is really context of brachot. So again, pilpile Rosh Amar Shahakol, Rav Amar Lo Klum. You don't say a bracha at all, which is how we paskin, right? The Rambam says a pilpilin va'zangvil bizman shehen rituvin mevarechahem tchila barei pri adama, right? So peppers and ginger, when they're still moist, if you eat them, you say barei pri adama. Avayveshim einan tu'unin bracha lo lifnehem v'lo la'acharehem. If they are dry and you eat them, then you don't need to say a bracha either before or after. Ibnei shehen tavlin ve'einan ochel. They are spices and they're not food. V'chein ochlin she'einan ru'uyin la'achila. Similarly, any food that's not fit for eating. Umashkin she'einan ru'uyin l'shtiyah. Einan tu'unin bracha lo lifnehem v'lo acharehem. All right, so this is the Rambam in Hilchot Brachot, and we see the context comes from here in the Gemara in Brachot, but also it's going to be pertinent to for us on Yom Kippur. All right, the way the Rambam ends off by going out of his way to say that they're not, things that are not ru'uyim l'ma'achal. So we know from the Mishnah in Yoma that food that isn't ra'ui l'achila is, if you eat it on Yom Kippur, you're patur. Okay, so Rava says v'lo klum. You don't say any bracha on pepper, and this fits in with Rava's shita on Yom Kippur that if you chew peppers on Yom Kippur, that you are patur. And the same way, if you chew ginger on Yom Kippur, you're also patur. Meiti v'haya Rabbi Meir Omer. משמע שנאמר וערלתם ערלתו את פריו, אין יודע שעץ מאכל הוא, אלא מה תלמוד לומר עץ מאכל? להביא עץ שטעם עצו ופריו שווה, ואיזה הוא? זה הפלפלין. למדך שפלפלין חייבים בעורלה, למדך שאין ארץ ישראל חסרה כלום, שנאמר ארץ אשר לא במסכנות תאכל בה, Eretz asher lo b'miskenu tuchal ba'lechem lo techsak lo ba. Okay. So the Gemara answers, it's the answer we saw already. Lo kasha, so this Breita is in the kasha on Rava. Aberitifta habiyabishta. Right, so when Rava was poter eating pepper on Yom Kippur, he was talking about dried peppers. So now we get to this next part that we just saw in our Gemara. Yoma Amarle Rabbanan L'Maremar. Kas Zangvila Biyoma de Kipure Patur. Amarava. Okay, so this is a little bit more Furash, right? It's adding a little bit more information, make it a little clearer than we saw in our Gemara. That because he's and also here it says Rabbanan L'Maremar, and in our Gemara it says Ravina. So we won't get into all the different Girsa issues, but he adds in this line, if you chew ginger on Yom Kippur, you're patur. So the question to Maremar starts with that. Kasangvil b'Yom Kippur patur, which is Rava, right? That was Rava says, if you chew ginger on Yom Kippur, you're patur. Amar Rava, in that, but Rava himself said, Hai himlata da'atya mi hindue sharia. This himlata that comes from India is mutar. Mavarchinale bore peri ha'adama. So Rava seems to contradict himself. Because on the one hand he says you're allowed to chew Zangvil on Yom Kippur, but on the other hand he says this himlata, you say it's permitted. So we still have to understand for what purpose does it need a heter. We'll come to that in a second. But you say a bracha on it. So what do we know now? If you say a bracha on something, it's considered to be food. And what did Rava say about chewing on ginger on Yom Kippur?
It's patur.
It's patur. So Rava seems to contradict himself because he says you can chew on Zangvil and on Yom Kippur and you're patur, meaning it's not food, it's not ra'ui la'achila. At the same time, he says, but this sugar ginger, this honey ginger that comes from India, you have to say a bracha on it. So how can it be? Well, kasha. So Merimar answers for Rava. He says it's not a kasha. Haberativta, abiyabishta. So one is talking about moist. So which is the moist in this? Which is the rativta? Which ginger we're talking about is moist?
I would say it's the Indian one because that's considered food.
Yeah. So that's rativta. So that's food. Habiyabishta, but what Rava was matir, that's something that's dry and it's not considered to be food. So this statement of Rava, Haihim Latadati Mibe Hinduay, or however you want to pronounce it, Hinduai, right, from the land of the Hindus, is permitted. So what does he mean it's permitted? For what purpose is it permitted? So Rashi says, Shaya, Ein ba lo mishum bishul nachrim, lo mishum giul nachrim. In other words, the fact that it was prepared by non-Jews, you might think that it falls under this xera, that you're not allowed to eat food that was cooked by non-Jews. But what kind of food are you not allowed to eat that was prepared by non-Jews? It has to be food that there's two criteria. It has to be food that that you don't eat raw, that has to be cooked, and it also has to be something that's considered to be michubad, right? To be like a meal that's ra'ui l'shulchan melachim. It's something you could put on the table of the king. So not everything. In other words, so if let's say if a I don't know, if a non-Jew cooks up let's say tomatoes, that's not considered to be bishul nachrim, because in other words, it's not I mean, technically it's bishul nachrim. It's not asur for you to eat it even after it's been cooked, because you could have eaten the tomatoes raw. But if they cook potatoes, that would be asur, because nobody eats raw potatoes. I shouldn't say nobody, kids, I don't know, people. But we don't normally eat raw potatoes. So that's what he means, sharia. That when Rava made this statement, sharia, he means first of all, you're allowed to eat it. It's kosher. It didn't have a badat texture on it, but okay, Rava was matir. And you say on it, Vare Prihatama. Okay. So ginger, we see from this, it's going to be, it's similar to pepper. Okay, actually, I don't want to get into the Hilchos Brachos aspect of it. Okay, let's go back. I think we're going to, even though we started late, I'm going to stop soon. Actually, yeah, this is more or less where I'm going to stop. I just want to look at Rashi here. So we looked at Himlata, and Rashi says, Mi Bei Hinduai, he says, Mi Eretz Kush. Kush would be, we associate with Ethiopia, but I don't know. In Rashi, I'm not sure what Rashi is basing it on to say Mi Eretz Kush, but maybe he thought that. I don't know.
He got it wrong, like Christoph Columbus.
Yeah, Yesh Lamar. In other words, maybe that was considered to be common knowledge in his time. But it's not like he, went off to find the Behin Duai or whatever. That was the Masoret that he had. Okay. Sharia, and this is right, it's permitted. This is from the statement from Rava. Ein bo mishum mishulei nachrim. And Rashi here says a little bit more mefurash, like I was saying. Shenechal kamot shuhu chai. Right, so there's no iser bishule nachrin because it's something that you can eat raw, right? It does not have to be cooked. So anything that doesn't have to be cooked to make it edible, if a goy cooks it, you're allowed to eat it. Velo mishum giulei nachrin denoten ta'am lifgam. It's also not mishum giulei nachrim because it's noten ta'am lifgam. I'll explain that. I'd like to explain that further, but not right now. Umida kamar ein bo mishum bishulei nachrim. Since it says, since the statement of Rava was, you're not high mishum bishulei nachrim. Shma mina derech achilato kishehu chai. So Rashi here says a little bit further. He's saying, once I know that I can eat this himlata, so the himlata is prepared ginger, and presumably it was cooked, like it was ginger that seems to have been cooked in honey, right? It's somehow cooked in or cooked with honey. But the fact that it's mutar to eat means that it's something, and we know that it's prepared by non-Jews because it's coming from India, and Jews don't live in India. And nonetheless, Rav is matir. He says you're allowed to eat it. So it means that it must be that the ginger that's in it is something that you can eat raw. And if it's something you can eat raw, then that contradicts what Rav said before, that you can chew on ginger on Yom Kippur. So then the Gemara answers, right? And so that's what Rashi means. Shma mina, I understand, since it's mutar to eat, even in its cooked state, it means that you were allowed to. It's something that would have been eaten also raw. Derech achilato kishuchai. It's the way to eat it also when it's raw. And so the Gemara answers, habe rutifta v'habiyabeshta. Right? So when Rava was matir to chew it on Yom Kippur, he was talking about the dried version. But if it's still moist, it hasn't been dried, then Rava would also say it's asur to eat it on Yom Kippur. And we also know that it's food because you would say Borei Pri Ha'adama on it. Okay. I think that's it for now. I'm going to try to flesh out one or two things maybe next week. But basically, we're going to go on. We're going to continue to talk about other things that people that have a status like this. That things that people don't necessarily, in some contexts, they do eat. What's status on Yom Kippur? But that's it for now. Okay, everybody, thanks for joining me, and I do hope to see you next week. If I come in and I feel like I'm not going to make it, I will message everybody on WhatsApp that we're not going to have shir, but otherwise, Bezrat Hashem, we'll meet next week.
All right. Thank you. Have a good day.
You too.
Shale, I might be in Chutz La'aretz next week. I'm not sure. It depends if Lufthansa has flights, and apparently they do have. I'm not sure now.
Yeah,
so,
you're going to Luxembourg?
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe.
If there are flights, maybe.
Okay. Well.
Yes,
okay.
Sure. Oh, okay.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye bye.